I was a graduate student at Stony Brook. I went to Stony Brook because it turns out they were the best or second best, strongest, very strong department in continental philosophy. Again, there are very few departments that teach continental philosophy. You find it now mostly in the Catholic schools, but it's not exclusively in the Catholic schools. So Stony Brook was and still is a center of contemporary continental thought. No one there was teaching Levinas. No one was even interested in Levinas. I was learning Nietzsche, Heidegger, the postmodernism, etc., as well as American philosophy. But my love in philosophy, my philia, my friendship, was with Levinas. And it just occurred to me, what am I doing here in Stony Brook? Levinas is alive and well and teaching in Paris. So I said goodbye, and I went to Paris. And I am so grateful I did, because it turned out, I couldn't have known this, it was the second to his last year of teaching. That is 1974, 1975. I only regret I didn't stay 1975, 76, because that was his last year. I would have had 2 years of him. I only got one. Levinas was not a university person in the sense that his career was not through the university. He got his PhD in Strasbourg. I mean, he was engaged in the intellectual life of France and of Europe, but he only late in his career became a professor in a university, because some people like Paul Ricoeur said, how is it possible that a philosopher of the stature of Levinas is not in our university system? As you know, his job was as the director of a teacher's school, a teacher's college. And high school. So they got him into the university system, first in Poitiers, then in Nanterre, and finally at the Sorbonne, the peak of French intellectual life, other than the Collège de France. In the classroom, he was fairly typical as a French professor. The French students never ask questions. They just listen. The teacher is the master. One thing I noticed from sitting in the front row, right in front of him, his papers, when he lectured, were clearly the junk mail that had come to his house that he would flip over and write his notes on. So it'd be a stack of odd-sized papers with his handwritten notes on them. At that time, he was really teaching otherwise than being, or beyond essence. So scrawled on those papers was otherwise than being, or beyond essence. He was also teaching a course on Heidegger. Because I remember something, this is something speaks well of Levinas. I once did raise my hand. Class was astonished, because I had the English translation of Being in Time with me, which has the German pagination on the sides. I asked, the class laughed at me. I mean, they're French. They couldn't believe that a student is raising his hand, because I asked Levinas, would it be possible that you tell us what page you're referring to when you're citing Heidegger in Being in Time? Because I wanted to follow it in my English translation. He just brushed off the class, and he said, of course he would. He'd be happy to do that. So for the next 20 minutes, he did it, and that was the end of that. But he saved me from what he thought might have been embarrassment. I think I was fairly immune to that. I wanted to meet him. I mean, I had traveled all the way over for the sole purpose of taking his classes. So I made up an excuse, a ridiculous reason to call him up. I knew very well that in the French university system, there's no syllabus, they don't assign books. You go to the class, you find out what's being taught, you do all the work yourself, and you learn or you don't learn. There's no mollycoddling. But I called him up, and I said I was curious as to what books he would want us to be reading for his class. Kind and shrewd gentleman that he was, he realized I wanted simply to be invited to meet him, right? Which he did. He invited me. So I got to go to his apartment in the 16th arrondissement. His wife was there. He was there. He graciously welcomed me in. He's famous for, when he had his guests, he would serve Cointreau. It's a aperitif, French. And in my bumbling French, we tried to talk some philosophy. I have no memorable stories to tell of what ideas went back and forth between us. I was in awe of this man. I could barely get words out of my mouth. But here's a story about his true ethical character. I thought at the end of this hour of almost conversation that he had invited me to come back the next week. It was only because I misunderstood his French that I thought that. So there I am, a week later, knocking at his door. He opens the door. He is clearly surprised that I am standing there, right? But he remembers who I am. And I mumble something about how I thought he had invited me. And his wife reminds him of something he did say at the end of our previous conversation that she realized that I interpreted as, come back next week. So he says, well, come in. And he welcomes me in, and once again we have a conversation in my bumbling French, of which I remember no particular content. But the graciousness of, I mean, his time was precious, because not only is he, you know, he's a professor at the university, he's still the director of that school, and he's writing his books. So, I mean, I have other stories I could tell, but there's two.